Good afternoon. I am Dr. Ambujam, Professor and Head, Department of Dermatology, Venereology and Leprology, Believers Church Medical College Hospital, Tiruvalla. And today, my talk to you is on cutaneous manifestations of autoimmune diseases. So, why this talk? Skin is a window to internal diseases, and skin diseases could definitely provide clues to the diagnosis of major diseases of organs within the body. What is autoimmunity? Autoimmunity is immunity against one's self, and this involves T and B lymphocytes. And autoimmune diseases generally involve not only the skin, but it's a multi-organ disease, autoimmune diseases. Now, to mention a few autoimmune diseases, the common ones that we dermatologists come across are pemphigus, that is autoimmune blistering diseases, or psoriasis itself is an autoimmune disease. But I am not going to talk about them because that is primarily skin is the target. So now there are other autoimmune diseases where skin is also one of the organs involved. And to mention a few, systemic lupus erythematosus, systemic sclerosis, dermatomyositis, rheumatoid arthritis, Sjogren's disease, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, insulin dependent diabetes mellitus, and inflammatory bowel disease. Just a few of the common autoimmune diseases. Now, I thought I would concentrate on the thyroid dysfunctions, diabetes, and adrenal diseases, which are autoimmune. So, coming to skin lesions and hypothyroidism. Hypothyroidism happens as an autoimmune disease when it is called thyroiditis. And here, other than for the antibodies that are produced, the skin features are the same as that of non-autoimmune skin diseases also. Now, what are the key features of hypothyroidism or myxedema? There will be diffuse myxedema, that is puffy face and lips due to water and mucopolysaccharide retention or accumulation. Then other autoimmune diseases like association with other autoimmune diseases like vitiligo, alopecia areata, Addison's disease, pernicious anemia, all those things can happen in patients who have autoimmune hypothyroidism. In addition, because they also have macroglossia and they may have acquired ichthyosis or cirrhosis due to reduced steroid synthesis, eccrine gland and sebaceous gland dysfunctions, then plantar keratoderma, which means thickening of the soles of the skin of the soles. They also have diffuse alopecia and the hair will be dry and brittle and easily broken. Just like the hair, the nails also will be brittle and they will be pale. It's not a very rare disease, hypothyroidism, but it is easily being missed, and that is why I thought we would dwell on the cutaneous manifestations of this hypothyroidism. This patient came to me just this morning and she had come for generalized pruritus, but it is seeing her coarse features, the madarosis, that is the loss of lateral third of the eyebrows, the madarosis, and the puffiness of the face that made me suspect hypothyroidism. And when I asked her whether she had any difficulties, whether she had been diagnosed earlier with hypothyroidism, I understood that she was on treatment, possibly not euthyroid, even with treatment. This is another disease I told you, which is an autoimmune disease associated with hypothyroidism, that is alopecia areata, where hair from a particular area will be lost. And so whenever we see such patients, we estimate the thyroid function. We do the thyroid function test because we need to diagnose or rule out hypothyroidism. Now, acquired ichthyosis. Acquired ichthyosis is one of the features of hypothyroidism. And even the dryness of the skin, which we dermatologists say cirrhosis, that is also a feature of hypothyroidism. And if somebody sees this, somebody sees a person with high cholesterol values, triglycerides high, and also if they notice this ichthyosis, they can very well check for the thyroid function test and they may be diagnosing hypothyroidism that quickly. Now, another thing which we come across as dermatologists, chronic urticaria. That is wheals or hives as the common man calls it. One of the commonest causes for chronic urticaria is hypothyroidism. And of course, we do investigate patients for hypothyroidism if patients come to us with urticaria. Then yet another thing is macroglossia. How we dermatologists make out macroglossia is, I do not know if you can appreciate, the margins of the tongue will have the indentation produced by the teeth. Then we know that it is macroglossia. And if other features fit in well, macroglossia is also a very important clue to the diagnosis of hypothyroidism. Now, just as autoimmune hypothyroidism is there, there is also autoimmune hyperthyroidism, wherein the skin will be warm and smooth, and facial flushing, palmar erythema, all due to increased cutaneous circulation. And hyperhidrosis, increased sweating of the patient, especially of the palms and soles. And these persons may also very rarely develop pruritus, urticaria and angioedema as a part of hyperthyroidism. So, unlike hypothyroidism, these patients with hyperthyroidism or Graves' disease, they have thin, glossy hair and again non-scarring diffuse alopecia. And plumber nails, I myself this is theoretical because we don't come across plumber nails so very often. So this nail may have some problems, may show some problems anatomically or in their morphology. They may have concave contours and they may show onycholysis. And here nails grow rapidly, and up to 5% of patients may have nail abnormalities. And 2% have Addisonian pigmentation of the skin, which is again something that we may not notice in our skin. But if noticed, it could give a valuable clue to the diagnosis of hyperthyroidism. And they have some of them have diffuse pigmentation of the sun-exposed areas of the skin, and most often mucous membranes and other flexures of the skin along with the nipple region. So all of them may be pigmented. The palmar creases may be more accentuated, and even the skin on the knuckles and areas of friction may be pigmented. That is how we diagnose Addisonian pigmentation that can happen as a part of hyperthyroidism. Now there is something called, which is exclusive to hyperthyroidism, is dermopathy or pretibial myxedema. Though it is a misnomer actually. Diffuse myxedema happens in hypothyroidism, while pretibial myxedema, though it is pretibial, commonly found on the tibia, because of the deposition of the mucose polysaccharides, they can appear as erythematous or skin-colored plaques and or nodules. Not only on the shins, they also can be seen on the arms, shoulders, head, neck, etc. Now, this is another feature of hyperthyroidism. That is, it's a very rare manifestation, and there is a triad for this. That is, clubbing of the nails along with soft tissue swelling of hands and feet and periosteal new bone formation. Now, this is the picture of pretibial myxedema, and this is a typical Graves' disease. You can see the exophthalmos, and this person also has the Addisonian pigmentation. I do not know if you can appreciate it in this type 5 or 6 skin. This is thyroid acropathy, again with diffuse swelling of the digits. Periosteal new bone formation, I told you, it's all part of thyroid acropathy. Now, yet another autoimmune disease is Addison's disease. 60 to 70% of Addison's disease is due to autoimmune adrenalitis. And the other causes, I'm sure people know, that is because of malnutrition, that is B12 deficiencies can produce Addisonian pigmentation, or drugs can produce Addisonian pigmentation. But most often, 60 to 70% of people with Addison's disease have hyperpigmentation of the skin and mucosa, again on sun-exposed areas and flexures, as I have already mentioned in hyperthyroidism. Here also it is Addison's disease that produces this type of pigmentation, and in hyperthyroidism it is called Addisonian pigmentation. So here, in addition, oral and genital mucosa also will be involved, and even the nails that produces melanonychia, that is nail plate pigmentation. Now I am going to a very important and common autoimmune disease, wherein, of course, everybody knows about diabetes and blood sugar, high blood sugars and all that. But as a dermatologist, there are certain clues which you can get from the skin, and one will be able to diagnose diabetes mellitus. And it is the need of the hour that we diagnose diabetes early. And autoimmune diabetes mellitus occurs as, we also call it as insulin dependent diabetes mellitus. And the cutaneous signs here are extremely important because it will heighten the physician's suspicion of diabetes mellitus. Also, it can alert the physician. And just if you notice, by chance, if the physician notices the change, the specific change on the skin, he or she will be able to diagnose diabetes mellitus promptly and help the patient. And we all know that at least in 1/3 of cases, diabetes mellitus, it is skin lesions that herald the onset of diabetes mellitus. And most of these manifestations occur because of neuropathy, nephropathy, and vasculopathy. Now, why does this happen? The pathogenesis of skin lesions, that is, there is increased glucose levels, we know, and there is non-enzymatic glycosylation of glucose. So this binds to, non-enzymatic means it binds to the protein, and because excess glucose binds to protein, there will be changes in the collagen, in the morphology of the collagen, in the anatomy of the collagen, and cross-linking of the collagen molecules happen, so skin becomes thick. An advanced glycosylation end product is there, that is 2,4,1-H-imidazole, which gives a yellow color, and that is also responsible for certain skin manifestations of diabetes. Now, there is something which is the commonest skin change in diabetes, that is called diabetic dermopathy. And here, this is due to vasculopathy and neuropathy. And 50% of diabetics, at some point of time, they will develop shin spots. Because they are on the shins, they are called shin spots. And they are small, brown, atrophic macules. And what is the importance? If a physician notices this, the importance of shin spots is, it should alert the physician regarding vasculopathy and neuropathy. And tests have to be done for that. So that is how you can diagnose, or you can prevent or treat promptly so as to prevent complications in the patient. So vasculopathy and neuropathy can be kept in mind. And now there is diabetic rubeosis. Why does this happen? This happens because the collagen, changes in the collagen on the membranes of the RBCs, those changes will take off the flexibility of the RBCs. The RBCs are flexible, so the biconcave shape becomes round, and they are flexible so that they can go through the pores of the blood vessels. But here, RBCs are not flexible. So what happens is they pool, and that will produce the blood becomes thick. The blood flow becomes, so blood stagnates there, and this leads to stagnation of the blood, stagnation of the RBC leads to the color, the rubeosis. So this can happen on the face, and there around 3 to 5% of patients may have rubeosis. And one needs to think of, again, one needs to rule out vasculopathy, especially microangiopathy, and one has to check the patient for any early retinopathy. So diagnosing early retinopathy will mean a lot in the treatment of diabetes. This is again palmar erythema because of again stagnation of the blood producing this sort of color, palmar erythema. Diabetic bulle. This happens in IDDM, and around very, very less only, around 0.5% of patients with IDDM develop diabetic bulle. And generally it is on the extremities, hands and feet, they occur spontaneously. So when they occur spontaneously and are on the hands and feet, one needs to think of Porphyria cutanea tarda, epidermolysis bullosa acquisita, bullous pemphigoid, etc., where tense bulle can be seen on the extremities also. But bullosus diabeticorum also needs to be kept in mind. And now diabetic yellow nails and skin. Probably this is not much discernible in Indian skin. And as I told you previously, end-stage glycosylation, product of non-enzymatic glycosylation, that product 2,4,1-H-imidazole is increased. That could be one of the reasons for diabetic yellow skin, or it could even be carotenemia that produces diabetic yellow skin and nails. And usually it is best appreciated in the distal hallux of hallux and palms and soles. Now this is very specific for diabetes. Necrobiosis lipoidica diabeticorum. It's very, very rare. 0.3 to 0.7% of people, diabetics get it, and women get it more than men. And early lesions are well-defined erythematous plaques, which with telangiectasia, and eventually they may ulcerate, and about 1/3. And usually it is pre-tibial. Here also what is important is retinopathy and nephropathy. So when you see pre-tibial, necrobiosis lipoidica diabeticorum, one needs to think of retinopathy and nephropathy as complications that the patient will develop later. Now, diabetic thick skin. There are three types. One is diabetic thick skin, again happens, as I told you, because of the collagen cross-linking, breaking the collagen structure. And so lots of collagen get thick, together. They get bound together and become and make the skin thick. So this can be of three types. One is where you cannot appreciate it, but it is measurable with a vernier caliper or something. If you measure, you can see that the skin is thickened. In some people, sclerodermatous changes can happen on the skin. They may not be able to freely move the joints, and the joint mobility will be impeded. And that is when we say, when they keep their joints together, the proximal interphalangeal joints may not oppose, and that is called the prayer sign, which is one of the distinct features of diabetes mellitus. And another thing, because of thickening of the skin, is the skin of the knuckles, they get pebbling, and that is called Huntley's papules, after the person who described it. Scleroderma diabeticorum, I am sure we are all aware of it. Again, in long-standing diabetes, uncontrolled diabetes, sometimes they get very thick skin, and that is called, especially over the nape of the neck and back, but it can extend downwards or even to the shoulders. Acanthosis nigricans, many of us are familiar with that, but if physicians note acanthosis nigricans, maybe if the patient comes for something else, for stiff joints, where one would think of arthritis, when if you notice the acanthosis nigricans, you can very well think of diabetes mellitus. And what is acanthosis nigricans? Black, thickened, velvety skin, mostly over the flexures. And it happens due to insulin resistance. And the resistance is primarily, the receptors are resistant to insulin, and the insulin goes and binds with the insulin receptor-like receptors, which will help in the proliferation of fibroblasts and keratinocytes. And that is how this thick skin happens. This is cirrhotic or dry skin. Dry skin in diabetes can happen because of anticholinergic action, because sweat glands don't function properly, because these are neuropathy, salt or vasculopathy. All these things can produce dryness of the skin. And eruptive xanthoma is one of the classic features of IDDM, and where there is a sudden crops of lesions, yellowish lesions appear, generally with an erythematous base. It's very rare, but generally it happens on the trunk, and poorly controlled diabetes. And this could very well be the first sign of IDDM, but here the children or the patients will be generally a little on the obese side. And here there is high risk for pancreatitis and coronary artery disease. That is the highlight that should be here, because the patients may go in for coronary artery disease and pancreatitis. So one has to think along those lines also. And here there is a decrease in the lipoprotein lipase activity. In diabetes mellitus itself, there is decrease in lipoprotein lipase activity, and so accumulation of serum triglyceride levels. When it goes more than 2000, it causes lipid deposition on the skin, and it will resolve once the diabetes comes under control. Now, having prioritized and spoken about the common autoimmune diseases that have skin manifestations, I'll quickly rush through cutaneous manifestations of few other autoimmune diseases like erythema nodosum, panniculitis, vasculitis, livedo reticularis, leg ulcers, pyoderma gangrenosum, Raynaud's phenomenon, and mouth ulcers. Most of them are high-sounding words. So erythema nodosum is septal panniculitis, and it's a type of delayed hypersensitivity. And they appear in crops as reddish, painful tender nodules, and usually they are located below the shins. And women are 3 to 6 times more prone for this. And even without treatment, in 2 to 4 weeks, you expect them to disappear, leaving bluish or bruise-like pigmented macules. And erythema nodosum is a sign of certain diseases. By itself, it is not a disease. It needs to be investigated. So, common conditions are inflammatory bowel disease, ulcerative colitis. So, when a patient comes to the gastroenterologist with bowel disease, dysentery, and if the patient has a history of erythema nodosum, then definitely you can have a high index of suspicion, and it's easier to diagnose these diseases, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease. In Crohn's disease also, other than erythema nodosum, there are other features also which I'll be talking of later. So 4 to 14% of people with Crohn's disease can develop erythema nodosum, and in SLE 2 to 5%, Sjogren's disease, Behçet's disease, Takayasu's arthritis, all these autoimmune diseases can manifest as erythema nodosum. Now, yet another disease that we think of is yet another manifestation, cutaneous manifestation of an internal disease, could be pyoderma gangrenosum. It's a very uncommon inflammatory skin disease. Of course, we do see them in the OPD once in a while. And they start as, we see them as ulcers mostly. They start as tender nodules and pustules. And once the pustules, they develop into ulcers, non-healing ulcers. That is because of the vasculitis and the ischemia. And this is also pyoderma gangrenosum. If we diagnose, it is highly suggestive of inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, and also rheumatoid arthritis. This is a picture of pyoderma gangrenosum. You can see the bogginess, the violaceous border outside, and it is a very non-healing ulcer. And when it heals with a cigarette paper type of scarring. But you can see the amount of inflammation and the slough in that. So this could be associated with the diseases that I've already mentioned. Now coming to Raynaud's phenomenon. Raynaud's phenomenon is where bluish discoloration of fingers happen because of vasospasm. And this is triggered by cold or stress or emotional upset. And there are certain, usually these patients may go to surgeons with pain and bluish discoloration, or they may even come to dermatologists, or they may go to rheumatologists with pain. And when they see, they will, on examination, they may notice the Raynaud's phenomenon. And usually the common autoimmune causes for Raynaud's phenomenon are SLE, systemic sclerosis, Sjogren's disease, dermatomyositis, etc. Now another manifestation is leg ulcers. So leg ulcers, which are chronic and non-healing, and they'll be extremely painful because it is the ischemia due to vasculitis that leads to leg ulcers. And the vasculitis happens because of autoimmune complex deposition within the blood vessels. And usually leg ulcers are common in SLE, systemic sclerosis, MCTD, antiphospholipid antibody syndrome, rheumatoid arthritis, etc. Having come to the skin, not only the skin, the mucosa also get involved in diseases, in autoimmune diseases like SLE, Sjogren's, systemic sclerosis. They all can present as erosions of the oral mucosa. And in SLE, usually they are painless and they'll be on the palate and cheeks. They could also produce gingivitis, gingivostomatitis, dental caries. So they may go to departments like dental departments, and there may be drying of the lips, cheilitis. And in SLE, 6.5 to 21% of patients may have mucosal lesions. Macrochelia, that is the lip, can be enlarged in SLE. Periodontitis may also be a problem in patients with autoimmune diseases, different oral ulcers. And in systemic sclerosis, because there is widespread sclerosis, fibrosis, and the facial fibrosis will give rise to shiny skin and microstomia, that is, they may not be a purse string mouth because they may not be able to open the mouth because of the angles of the mouth, all of them will be hide bound. And less than 40 millimeters only, maybe the width of the mouth opening. And angular cheilitis, glossitis, caries, periodontitis, all these things happen in systemic sclerosis. Another yet common thing which these people mostly come to us, but that is small vessel vasculitis. There they present as palpable purpura, that is, you can palpate the purpura. This is because of small vessel vasculitis. And the causes of small vessel vasculitis again, SLE, dermatomyositis, systemic sclerosis, inflammatory bowel disease, rheumatoid arthritis. And one important thing is Henoch-Schönlein purpura, that is mostly in children and adolescent and young adults. Medium vessel vasculitis also, rather than this palpable purpura, that will produce nodules, punched out ulcers, livedo and gangrene. Now, livedo reticularis is something which is very difficult to appreciate in our skin, but that is mottled vascular reticular pattern, and lace-like purplish discoloration may happen. That is due to reduction in blood flow through arterioles. Feature of, it can be along with APLA, it can be a feature of SLE. And what is worthwhile noting is that these persons can develop neuropsychiatric problems, thrombocytopenia and vasculopathy, that is SLE with antiphospholipid antibodies. This is one of our patients in whom we diagnosed SLE, where she has, I suppose you can make out the mottled skin, the purplish color, the deoxygenated look of the skin. Now coming to the take-home message. See, up to 1/3 of patients with autoimmune diseases, they will present with skin manifestations. And if physicians and rheumatologists and others who may have a high index of suspicion of these diseases, if they just examine the skin of the patient also, sometimes they may get clues that will help them to make a fast and prompt diagnosis. And we know that we often test patients extensively for diagnosis of autoimmune diseases, and some of these tests can be prevented if clinically we could correlate and by looking at even the skin manifestations. Thank you.